Thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. Protect your online data and privacy today by going to expressvpn.com/inside. We talk a lot about video games on this channel, from the biggest hits to the games that end up on everybody's do not playlist. We hit everything. So in a year with the triumphant return of Animal Crossing to a sequel to one of the best Doom games ever, the drop of long-awaited titles like The Last of Us Part 2 and Final Fantasy VII Remake, to surprise darlings like Fall Guys and Among Us, and of course delay after delay after delay after delay of games like Cyberpunk 2077, Halo Infinite, Psychonauts 2, and No More Heroes 3, you almost couldn't imagine anything really coming out of nowhere to surprise you in 2020. And yet, thanks to a very small, little itty-bitty mention, today on the last Insight Gaming of 2020, we're going to talk about a little Nintendo game most of us have never thought would ever see the sunrise again. It's finally time to talk about Golden Sun.
We gon' party, hey, hey. We gon' party.
Alright, so if you've watched any of the various features I've written, you'll notice a common trend. I like Golden Sun, and I will add it to anything I can. Within reason, of course. FYI, the working title of this script is I'm going to talk about Golden Sun, and you can't stop me. So this is more or less a realization that my time has finally come, and I get to use this little rumor as an opportunity to make an entire video to talk about one of my absolute favorite franchises of all time. So let's explain why Golden Sun is on the tips of tongues of nearly dozens of gamers worldwide right now. Recently, there was a rumor of a new Mario sports game coming soon, like really soon. The rumor came from the user Zippo on Reset Era, who has a history of things like Smash leaks, in a big thread with users sharing thoughts and information about the Big N. Zippo's post claimed that, quote, there's a new Mario sports game coming from Camelot in the first half of 2021. Wasn't told what sport it was, but golf is a safe assumption. Which, yeah, cool, great, neat. I like Mario golf games. They're fun. Toadstool Tour was a personal favorite. But the big eye-widening moment for everyone, or me, was the follow-up from Zippo. Quote, sorry GS fans, the sun will rise again. Eventually. That's the money right there. Now, is this rumor believable? Maybe. But honestly, who cares? That one little line is more than enough fuel that I need to get started talking about Golden Sun again. So let's start with the history of that Camelot place that Zippo mentioned. Camelot, also known as Camelot Software Planning, has been in the game development business for a very long time and helped create some amazing titles in their tenure. Their longest running series is the Shining series, which is still being released today, though not being developed by Camelot themselves anymore, of course. Camelot created the series with Shining in the Darkness and kept it going until 1997's Shining Force 3, ending their development with the series holding 10 games under their belt. The Shining games are amazing, by the way, and gave Sega a unique RPG series to combat Nintendo's hold on the Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest series back in the Genesis and SNES era. They also did a little title called Beyond the Beyond, which was a more traditional style RPG for the newly released PlayStation console back in 1995. It also started a trend of using an active playing system to keep players engaged in the usual slow-paced RPG battles. You'd see this active playing system be adapted to almost every popular RPG from then on, including Super Mario RPG, Final Fantasy VIII, Costume Quest. You get the point. These games all have you pressing buttons in time with your attacks and defends to do more or take less damage, something Beyond the Beyond popularized. That's great and all, but how did Camelot, who arguably seems to be favoring Sega and PlayStation platforms at this point, end up developing an IP for Nintendo? Glad you asked. It all started with a series you're probably familiar with, Everybody's Golf, known in the States as Hot Shots Golf. Hot Shots Golf was such a huge success, it kind of put Camelot on the map for quirky sports games. And this caught Nintendo's attention, which also means that the original Hot Shots Golf was the only game in the series that was made by Camelot. And so in 1998, after the release of Shining Force 3, and due to some struggles in dealing with Sega, Camelot signed on as an exclusive second-party developer for Nintendo. 1999's Mario Golf for the N64 and Game Boy Color were the first games released under this partnership. Mario Tennis quickly followed in 2000, again hitting the N64 and Game Boy Color. So go ahead and thank Camelot for the creation of Waluigi. You kinda owe them for that one. While Mario Tennis and Mario Golf on the N64 were very much quirky sports titles with a Mario coat of paint on them, the Game Boy Color versions were drastically different and had you playing as an original character, leveling up, traversing around, and interacting with characters in the aims of being the best at insert sport here. This is where a lot of Camelot's classic RPG developing charm was funneled into, but they weren't satisfied. With their old IP, the Shining series, now being handled by Grasshopper Manufacture, who would later go on to create the No More Heroes franchise, Camelot, on the other hand, was busy creating a whole new RPG franchise for Nintendo, Golden Sun. Inspired by their work with Beyond the Beyond and Shining Force 3, Camelot jumped into creating this new IP for the Nintendo 64. Of course, the Nintendo 64 was on its way out by the time they got around to developing it, so they quickly shifted it to the Game Boy Advance instead. This was one of the main reasons why Golden Sun took about 18 months to complete. That and the fact that Golden Sun and its sequel, The Lost Age, were actually developed as one title and then later split into two. The reason for that split was hardware limitation, not development problems. The Game Boy Advance carts couldn't handle the massive size of Golden Sun and The Lost Age, so that's why the split happened. The shift to making a GBA game actually solidified the success Golden Sun got, as it was released right around the time the new handheld launched and was one of the first RPGs on the platform, as well as one of the first new IPs released. One of the other ones, by the way, was the release of a Wars series game, Advance Wars, outside of Japan for the very first time. Now that we've finally gotten to the part of the story where Golden Sun is released and exists, what the heck is Golden Sun exactly? Simple answer is that it's a love letter to the traditional JRPGs that came before it, both embracing the history of the developer and all the new things they'd learned from partnering with Nintendo. The complex answer, well, it's a tale of loss seen from the eyes of 4 and later 8 young would-be heroes. As children, series protagonist Isaac, along with his friends Garrett and Jenna, witnessed Jenna's parents and brother Felix, as well as Isaac's father, swept away by a raging river during a torrential storm and an avalanche. The three become even closer afterward, with the remaining family members forming an extended familial bond, and by the time 3 years have passed, Isaac, Garrett, and Jenna are now fully studying the ways of Synergy, the world's magical equivalent, under the scholar Kdin. This is where the main storyline begins, and follows Isaac and Garrett being confronted by antagonists Alex, Satoros, Minardi, and a masked figure once they claim the elemental stars, magical items, from the temple hidden inside Mount Aleph. TLDR, bad guys kidnap Jenna and Kdin. The elemental stars get split between the protagonist and antagonist. God turns out to be a giant floating rock with an eyeball in it, and it becomes a race to light or prevent the lighting of 4 magical lighthouses around the world of Weyard, which is where the game is set. And that's the basics without going into too much spoilers. Golden Sun and Golden Sun: The Lost Age are one cohesive plot. The former telling Isaac, Garrett, and later Ivan and Mia's side of the story, with The Lost Age picking up from the conclusion of Golden Sun, but from the antagonist side of things, letting you take control of Jenna, as well as 3 others. Again, trying to avoid spoilers best I can here. The Lost Age caps off with an open enough ending to leave room for future games, but gives enough closure to satisfy. Okay, let's quickly talk about gameplay before jumping back into what came next for Golden Sun. The battle system is pretty straightforward JRPG affair, but it's supported by a very different type of class system. Each element, earth, fire, wind, water, which are represented by planetary bodies Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Mercury respectively, has its own list of classes based on how many Jinn are collected and equipped. Jinn are these adorable little creatures that embody the power of a certain element. The more you have, the stronger you are, plain and simple. A Venus adept, someone who's born with an affinity for earth elements, that has only Venus Jinn equipped, will be able to use the highest level of earth spells. And the same goes for every other type of adept. It's in the mixing of matching of these Jinn where Golden Sun's battle class system shines. Want to turn the hard-hitting fire adept Garrett into something more akin to a mage class? Go for it! He's not built for it stat-wise to fully support it, but you totally can do it, and that's cool. The other part of these Jinn that makes Golden Sun so cool is by collecting them and doing certain side quests, you get summons. And the summons are some of the coolest looking summons ever! Quick montage, please. gameplay basics, without getting into too much of the weeds here. So let's zip on back to where the series went from here. With the release of Golden Sun: The Lost Age in 2002 for Japan, 2003 for the rest of the world, we would hear nothing more from the series until 2009, when it was revealed that Camelot was developing a third title for the Nintendo DS. The third game was met with critical praise, but fans were more divided on it. Some hated it, some loved it, and others were just happy to have a new Golden Sun game. I'm one of the folks that loved it, by the way. This DS title, later fully revealed as Golden Sun: Dark Dawn and released in 2010, took place 30 years after the conclusion of The Lost Age, and featured the children of our longtime series protagonists as the new playable characters. Despite the praise, the fact that Dark Dawn was released so late in the life cycle of the original DS more or less killed the game's chances at any major success. Because by then, Nintendo fans were saving their money and hype for the soon-to-be-released Nintendo 3DS. Since then, save for a few nods in the Super Smash Bros. Franchise, any major word on the continuation of Golden Sun has been minimal, at best. Okay, so why am I, and many like me, so hung up on getting more Golden Sun games? 3 titles released for what is more or less a niche RPG in a sea of amazing RPGs isn't a small feat. Not to mention the fact that it was able to coexist with long-standing favorites like Final Fantasy on the GBA with reasonable success. The reason is simple. Dark Dawn ends on a cliffhanger with the text, "The end, ... being the last thing seen before the game kicks you back to the title screen. Regardless of if you love Dark Dawn, hate Dark Dawn, or tolerate Dark Dawn, no one likes to be kept waiting on a conclusion for 11 years! Especially when any word of a Dark Dawn sequel comes from baseless rumors, desperate fan wishes, and me personally writing letters to Nintendo begging, pleading desperately for a hint at any real, formal ending to the series. And that's what leads us back to Zippo's comment on Reset Era. Just the quietest of mentions of the sun rising again on this long dormant series is enough to get die-hard fans like me foaming at the mouth. The biggest problem I have at the moment is not really that Golden Sun 4 hasn't been announced or released, but the fact that being able to play Golden Sun, The Lost Age, and Dark Dawn are chores now. Aside from having physical GBA carts to play and the hardware to play them on, Golden Sun and The Lost Age only saw one additional re-release on the Wii U as digital downloads. So yeah, you can kind of tell how that went. As for Dark Dawn, unless you have something that can play original DS games and an actual cart of that, you can't play the game officially on anything or anywhere. And thus we're left wondering and waiting patiently for any news. Golden Sun Collection perhaps? Digital re-releases? Remastered versions? Anything? Until we get actual confirmation from Nintendo about the Golden Sun rising again, it seems our hopes will remain fully eclipsed by the morning moon. If you're a Golden Sun fan, chime on into the discussion in the comments. I want to hear from you. There's gotta be more than just me out there. If you've never heard of it before, well, now you have. But what other long-dormant Nintendo series would you like to see rise from the grave? Mother? F-Zero? Kid Icarus? Leave them in the comments. Maybe Nintendo will actually listen to us this time. And we'll see you next time.
I realized this a little bit ago. Ubisoft loves drones. They got drones in everything. So many of their main titles are so drone forward in a way that I didn't realize. So Watch Dogs Legion is just overflowing with drones. It's like if Willy Wonka had a room in his factory dedicated to unmanned